Good afternoon, good morning to all of you. Very happy to partner with our colleagues from Bloomberg Philanthropies to organize this webinar. Thank you all for attending. It's my understanding that we have close to 30 cities registered for this discussion from across the globe. I'm very impressed to see cities from Asia. It must be very late in Asia these days. So thank you very much for your participation. My name is Aziza Akmouche. I'm heading OECD's division on cities, urban policies, and sustainable development. This is the place where this work on cities innovation capacity was carried out over the past few months. We're very happy to have this opportunity for a first in-depth discussion with many of you as city focal points who have participated very actively in this piece of analytical work that we've carried out over the past few months. The idea of the webinar is really to share with you some of the insights that have come out of what I think we can call the largest ever survey of cities innovation capacity worldwide that we carried out with our Bloomberg's colleagues. And that provides a very nice helicopter view of how cities are innovating, what is driving innovation in cities, and how you've been assessing and self-assessing in many instances the outcomes of your innovation goals and strategies. I have to say that as a background, and this is a bit of a teaser that the webinar is providing, you will all be receiving in the coming days the draft report that is behind this work. There's over 80 pages of more in-depth analysis and typologies and tailored recommendations that build on the qualitative and quantitative findings from the survey. We'll give you a very quick scan at where we stand, and you'll have opportunities to actually comment on the draft and over the coming weeks to share, more insights, advice, guidance to make sure we get this right and to make sure that the outcome of the report, which is this checklist we're providing as a tool to guide decision-making in different cities, is actually relevant to your day-to-day work. So very happy that we have the opportunity for this first discussion, and very thankful to all those who could make it online. Maybe some housekeeping arrangements before we get started, so everybody's on the same page. You are all having access to the discussions and the videos of the speakers that are staged for this webinar, and you will have all the opportunity to send questions either during presentations if you want, and we have some colleagues moderating here that can keep track of your questions, and so we make sure we address them in the end together with the speakers, or at the end of the webinar we have a dedicated half an hour after the first hour of presentations that is really devoted to the interactions with all of you. So you'll have an opportunity to interact directly with the speakers and with OECD Secretariat and Bloomberg's team. The second thing you must know is that this webinar is being recorded, so you'll have the opportunity to access the full webinar. We'll send the web link after the discussion, and maybe also to share it with your colleagues within your different city administrations and whoever you think may be interested in the nature of discussions we're going to have. And then the third point is to say that you will have, as I said in the introduction, more time after this webinar to provide more detailed comments on some of the key messages that we're going to introduce. So I'm very happy to moderate this hour and a half together. We'll start, as you've seen from the agenda, with a quick overview of the survey findings, and my colleague Sena Segetsby, who's actually coordinating our Champion Mayors initiative for inclusive growth, will take you through some of the findings that certainly don't do justice to the depth of the analysis that is behind, but that I hope can create some interest and appetite on your side. And then we'll have the opportunity to hear from 5 speakers, 4 city representatives from Stockholm, New York City, Syracuse in the United States, and Montreal. And then from our colleague Stephanie from Bloomberg Philanthropies. I'll be introducing the speakers as we get there, but so you have an idea of the stage management of the webinar. All the speakers were instructed to keep their presentation short, no more than 10 minutes. They will be notified via the chat 2 minutes before their time comes to an end. We count on everybody's discipline to make sure that we leave a bit of time for discussion. So with this, I suggest that we get started, and maybe Sena, you can introduce the findings from the survey. Everybody has access to the slides on the screen, so that should be pretty fluid.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Sena Tegbedzi. I'm the coordinator of the Champion Mayors initiative. And over the last year, we have been working closely with Bloomberg Philanthropies on this work to discover how cities are developing and deploying their innovation capacity. And through that, we launched the survey that Aziza spoke about earlier to cities around the world to discover how they define their innovation capacity, how they define their innovation capacity, what within the organization, how it's structured, some of the funding and resources that are applied to their work, and some of the, what are the outcomes and the data that they use to support their innovation. And so Bloomberg and the Champion Mayors initiative came together because they both believe that cities are fertile playing grounds for innovation, and that innovation is as much about the culture, people, leadership, and engagement as it is about technology and data. So through this, we launched this survey that will result in a report, a forthcoming report, enhancing cities' innovation capacity, which we'll share with all of you. But before I start, I wanted to share how we went in defining innovation capacity and what we heard from cities. So we defined innovation capacity within the construct of the survey as the human, financial, and institutional resources and skills that can catalyze, implement, and advance cutting-edge, long-term, and bottom-up problem solving. Now, when we asked cities how they defined it or what it looks like in their cities, they also used some of the same words. So they talked about problem solving as being a key part of their capacity. They spoke about the ability to test new concepts and prototype. They talked about understanding big pictures and coming up with different methods like behavioral science and human-centered design to be able to innovate and to be able to carry out this work within their administration. Now I'll explain more about the survey. Next slide. So the survey was constructed in 5 dimensions. One that focused on the definition, goals, and structures of and approaches to innovation within the municipality. Others around the organization and structure within the municipal administration. So how is innovation organized within the municipal administration? The funding and so the resources that were at the disposal of the innovation teams, some financial, some others. And then the data that the municipality was generating, managing, sharing, and deploying to be able to do this work and solve problems, as well as what the outcomes were, what was innovation helping cities do better, and how was it helping them do it better. So who responded to the survey? We had a range of cities that responded from across the world, as presented on the map. Some very large cities, New York, which is on the webinar with us today, Los Angeles, Madrid, Tokyo, and Paris. We had the medium-sized cities, the Cincinnati, Ljubljana, Otsu, and though we targeted cities globally, The responses did come in heavily from North America, with 64% of the respondents coming from North America, and the next largest group from European cities. Now, as I move on to the analytical framework, we found that the concepts of innovation were quite large, especially related to the public sector. So we tried to break it down into three building blocks. One around the organizational arrangements, which refers to how innovations carried out formally and informally within the institutional structures of the municipality. The data management capacity, which relates to how the city's ability to harness and use data for their work, their policy making, and their other work, and as well as their openness to partnership, the ability for cities to establish partners with citizens and also external partners and external stakeholders that can help them deploy this capacity. Now, the building blocks are arranged in two factors. One that was, of course, internally when we speak about the data and organizational arrangements, the endogenous factors, and the other more external when we speak about citizen engagement and partnerships, the exogenous factors. Now, what is driving innovation in cities? Now, cities, we're counting on them more than ever to house us, provide us with different services, give us jobs, get us from place to place, support us with infrastructure. And as we're doing this, we know there are huge global trends that are happening globally within cities and that are manifesting in cities. So innovation was reported to help cities deal with and understand better the demographic changes that are coming because of aging and migration, the climate change, what the infrastructure implications that are caused by climate change, and how to work within this new frame with how things are digitalizing and automizing what will happen to jobs and how cities run and the infrastructure we need. It's also helping improve service delivery. So through the cost of services to be able to reach different residents and to be able to expand services, and as well as finally to spur economic growth by providing the talent and the technological infrastructure for companies to open, for people to move about, for there to be economic resiliency and growth within a city. Now, the importance of innovation capacity does really rely on people doing the work in cities. And when asked about the staff and and how innovation was organized within cities, we found out quite a lot. That regarding the full-time municipal staff dedicated to innovation, that there was a spread across the cities, and that on average, dedicated staff reported showing higher levels of familiarity with innovation approaches, concepts, and activities. The large majority of cities responding have staff that were dedicated staff to innovation work, and that 56% of these cities responding had innovation departments with 10 employees or less, and about 10% had staff of 15 employees or less, and that innovation teams were fairly new. Only 21% of the respondents had a team of staff that was 5 years or older, and that the size really ranged within the municipality, and that sometimes municipalities view this as complementary work to their existing functions. Some of the skills that popped up regarding their innovation, city's innovation capacity to innovate, are project management skills, community development, community engagement skills, and engineering, designers, and sociologists, and especially also data management, as we'll discuss. Now, data played a role. Data was one of the big areas that we focused on within the survey, asking cities how and what data that they had sufficient in order to problem solve. And cities responded with that they had an overwhelming amount or a good sufficient data source regarding policy and law enforcement and mobility from their transit networks, but insufficient data related to social inclusion and equity, culture, and social welfare and services. So what we also asked about funding, the resources that were available to cities in order to be able to lift up their innovation work. And an overwhelming amount of cities reported that funding came from their municipal budget, that a portion of their resources came from their municipal budget. Now, we didn't get to ask to what extent or to what extent the municipal budget made up their funding, but they did state that funding did come from the operating budget of the municipal budget, that to a lesser extent, it also came from national governments, with a larger share of this portion coming from outside the U.S. and Canada, and that external funding, external partnerships also, external sources also played a role in funding the innovation capacity within cities. Now, measuring, being able to measure and track how the innovation goals and capacities are being met is a struggle for cities across the board, but we were not a stranger to that. Only 16% of cities reported that they conduct a comprehensive and systematic evaluation of their impacts for their innovation strategy. And when asked deeper about how it was going, how their measurement was going, cities reported that 33% of the cities reported it was going well, 21% reported it was going so-so, and 31%, unsurprisingly, reported that it was too early to say. So there still needs to be time to really see if their inputs are resulting in the outcomes they want to see. Now, for the report, we will be developing a checklist for cities so that they can, to support their innovation capacity. But what we learned was that there were a matter of, we broke it down into 4 different categories of how cities can successfully deploy and reap the benefits of their innovation capacity. And one category was around their organizational arrangements, how to make formal strategies, which structures within the municipality proved to be most beneficial to deploying the innovation capacity. Others are around data management, the partnerships that support your data capacity, and the data and how to share it, and the lessons that have been learned across cities around their data management. Another is around their innovation governance, how they react, respond to their partnerships and citizens. And then the other is around their innovation outcomes, how to measure the goals that they can set in place that relate to their innovation work. As a part of this work, we also were able to come up with a profile of innovation capacity for cities that is comparable across the 89 cities that responded to the survey. And this picks up on the components that we discussed earlier, the funding, that is where the funding is coming from to support innovation capacity, the policy areas that are most aligned with the city's innovation work, the partnerships they form, the structures, the organizational structures that are in place, and the data that they're using to support their work. And then finally, the outcomes that they're experiencing or measuring as a part of their innovation work.
Very good. Thank you very much, Sena. And as I said, please take this as a teaser. You will have access to the full report and plenty of time to react on the details. I'm very happy now to move to the second part of the webinar and give the floor to 4 city representatives so that they can take us through their own innovation strategy. We will start with Gunnar Brockman, who is the Director for Innovation at the City Executive Office in Stockholm. He's been occupying this position since June 2015. He's also an advisor to the Royal Institute of Technology and to the Kista Science City, as well as the chair of Stockholm IT region. You're responsible, Gunnar, for the development of Stockholm City's innovation strategy, and you're in charge of developing this strategic cooperation with higher education and industry in particular. This was a big message from the survey as well, how you work with stakeholders, how you build these partnerships. So I'm happy to give you the floor for 10 minutes to take us through some of the findings of your work.
Thank you. I think you got everything I'm working with. And I'm also working very close to the mayor of City of Stockholm and work at the executive office. But shortly of City of Stockholm. Stockholm is the capital of Sweden in north of Europe. And we have nearly 1 million citizens in the city and 2.5 in the region. The city is responsible for the citizens against the Swedish municipal law. We are responsible for their social care and education, recreation, and for operate and plan and build the city. And for that, we have to take taxes from the income for the citizens. Why work with innovation? That's a good question. Because we always have a good financial situation and we're a rich city. The problem for us is that we just now have many main challenges for the futures, as many other cities. We can't manage it ourselves. We need help with the rest of the society. We have the growing populations. The number of citizens increased very fast just now. And to the 2030, we have to build more than 140,000 apartments in City of Stockholm. It's the same number as the first city in Sweden, Malmö, is today. The globalization, that's the competition between employees, financing, investment, students, and everything to the rest of the world. We must be very interesting and attractive for the rest of the world. And we have the geography. We built in an existing city, a lot of bridges, a lot of funnels, a lot of islands. It's very green and blue, but very polluted. So very costful to big new cities. And we have the climate change, the climate threat. We have to build the future city in a smart climate way. And finally, we have the inhabitants, the older people, that will be more and more, the young people that have the digitalization in their blood. So I have to think how we have to work with them to live in the city, to work for them. So we need to deliver the services in the future to lower cost, with higher quality, and for more people. And then we must be better to cooperate with the rest of the world, to the municipalities, to the industrial, to the universities. in Sweden, in Europe, and the rest of the world. We need to find new solutions, and then the thing, digitalization is one of the most important way to work. We have to better prioritize. We do a lot of things, but we have to prioritize what's most important for us. We must be smarter. And it's about the citizens' welfare in the future. If we don't find ways to find solutions for the future, it will be the last generation of this welfare system. That's why innovation is important for us. The City Council have decided the vision for the city, Stockholm, the smartest cities in the world, and have defined for who we are. We want to have the highest quality of life for the citizen and the best environment for the business. But we want to do it in a long-term, sustainable way, ecological, financially, socially, and democratically. But we also must do it in an open, connected, innovative way. We must have open data, open minds, and work together. And for that, the City of Stockholm have decided 3 strategies: an innovation strategy, a strategy for personal policy, and a strategy for smart and connected city that are tools. And that's important for me. And in the innovation strategy, we have to strengthen governments towards improved innovation capacity, develop tools for innovation, strengthen employees' knowledge of innovation, develop the leaderships. I think the leadership is one of the most important things. And external, develop the city's partnership for innovation. For example, we have strategic partnership with both the Royal Institute of Technology and Stockholm University. And we must strengthen the city's role as innovative procurement. One example, next, is a project or a platform or a way to learn that we call Digital Demo Stockholm. I think it's a unique example of regular collaboration between the public sector, business communities, and higher educations. We work together with the Stockholm region. The Stockholm region is responsible for the public transportation and the hospitals. And we have to define our future challenges that need to be solved and show and discuss it with the companies and with the universities. We work, for example, with Ericsson, Skanska, ABB, that's global Swedish companies, and to the universities, so they can help us to find the solutions. And we work at the design thinking method and at the platform we call Open Lab. Then I have to demonstrate example that we can find solutions. And we have prioritized 4 areas that is special interest and especially important for us. That access to clean water, better life for elder people, efficient transport service, and technology for equal opportunities. And we work with a lot of projects through that to learn how to cooperate, because it's not so easy, because we have so different culture in the companies, in the university, and in the city. But for example, we have a project with smart locks for elder people. And the innovation is not the smart locks. The innovation is to work in other ways so you can get more time for the people. You don't need to go around all the time with the keys and looking for them. Another project is iWater, that's a system to detect pollution in the drink water in Lake Mälaren and in the wastewater, so you in real time can see if some pollution is going on. But it's not so easy to work together with the different partners. You have many problems. That's why it's a learning project, because you have to learn each other. We have the municipal laws, we have public procurement laws, there are other legislations, internal, externals. We have the fundings, who have to finance this project. I saw that over 90% of all cities have money in the budget. We don't have money in the budget. We have a total budget. In this budget, we have to finance also the ongoing operation and innovation projects. So they have to find external financing from some institutes. When you work with digitalization, you must have a technical platforms so you can speak to each other. There's no idea to have innovation in the technical solutions that's not scalable. The companies can't build no business models on that. And one of the biggest problems we have in Sweden is who owns the patent rights, intellectual patent rights. It's discussion from the researchers, from the companies, or the city they have to discuss. So that's a big problem. But the main problem is culture and leadership. I have to change the culture and change the leadership, external and internal. Next. So if I have to get advice to all other cities, is to prioritize the internal work with your own organization. Innovative products and services already exist. The big challenge is to use them and scale it up. Political leadership is important. Leadership is important. All leadership should be based on trust, have an open-minded leadership. But it's also important to actively listen to the employees. We have 40,000 employees, 1,500 leaders. They know the city and the local business. They meet them every day. They know where the problems are and even have innovative ideas how to find solution of that. So support them, dare to try. That's my advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gunnar Björkman, Director for Innovation in the City of Stockholm. I think a lot of the examples that you've provided echo some of the messages that came out of the survey. You've put a lot of emphasis on leadership. That's something we actually value very much. The primary common denominator of all champion mayors in our initiative is their political commitment to fight inequalities. It was very strongly emphasized in the survey that without leadership, you can use all the technology and capacity tools you want. Not much will happen in the end. And I think you had a very humble view at the barriers that continue to be prominent and that may not always incentivize the upscaling of innovation experimentation. So thank you for that. I'm sure this will raise a lot of questions from our audience. I will now move to the second speaker, and I'm delighted to welcome Carson Hicks, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the New York City Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity. Carson, you don't have a webcam, so everybody doesn't have to wonder why they don't see you on the screen, but we'll hear you very well. You're overseeing the work of the office and the staff on evaluation, design, and methodology. We look forward to hearing your insights on New York City's innovation capacity. You have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you so very much. And I do apologize to everybody for the lack of video. Please don't read too much into it in terms of our ability to innovate. So I'm going to talk about a few things today, basically how New York City is developing our capacity to innovate, the role of innovation in our economic development goals, and some tips for investing in innovation citywide. Before I do that, some context about New York City. So we have a very diverse population of 8.6 million people. My office, the Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity, is an innovation lab that was created in 2006. It's centrally located within the Office of the Mayor. We have approximately 40 different city agencies that deliver services either directly or indirectly that report up to the mayor, and there are sort of pockets of innovation within each of these city agencies. And just for greater context, there's about 350,000 people working for New York City government. Next slide, please. So we have an explicit focus on using evidence and innovation to reduce poverty and promote equity. So we are not kind of citywide innovation just for the sake of innovation. It's very focused. But what we fundamentally believe is that innovation is about getting better results. And in order to do this, you really need to assess the outcomes of your efforts. You need to evaluate. You need to capture and document lessons learned. And you need to accept that there will be probably many failures in order to have a few successes. So right now, these are the capacities, basically, that we bring to our innovation efforts within our office. We have a 60-person office. Each of these capacities, from research to digital products, these are different teams. Folks sometimes all work together on a single project, or they'll work individually. We partner with other city agencies and other offices within the mayor's office. Research is something that sort of flows throughout everything, but we really have a lot of different capacities around human-centered design, behavioral design, creation and management of digital products as well as program design. I'm now going to turn to innovation and economic development. Next slide, please. So the city has a lot going on in terms of economic development, but one of the ways this is captured and easiest to discuss is something we call One NYC, and this is the longer-term strategic planning document of New York City. It's updated every 4 years, so pretty much every mayoral term. This is the second update that was produced by the current mayoral administration, and it was very recently released within the past few weeks. Sort of a blueprint, for the future of New York City. Back a slide, please. So it has a, can you go back a slide, please? Backward? Back, one more. Thank you. So it has an explicit focus on equity as a core governing principle, and there's 8 goals and 30 initiatives, and one of those goals is a focus on poverty reduction and economic mobility. I'm going to talk about 3 ways that we have supported, my office has supported this longer-term vision. Next slide, please. One is around how to measure poverty. So here in the U.S., most places, including the federal government, local governments, use something called the Federal Poverty Measure. It is not adjusted for differences in, geographical differences in the cost of living, which if you live in a place like New York is problematic because it's very expensive to live in New York. So we developed this alternate measure. It's much more nuanced. It sort of takes into account a variety of different things like housing subsidies and tax credits and all sorts of things that the federal government measure does not take into account. We create measure poverty rates for individuals, and we break out poverty by demographics and geography within New York City. And just for context, so when we released this report, which came out last month, using 2017 data, the poverty rate here in New York City was 19%. The federal rate had it at 16.6%. So poverty is higher using this measure. The other thing that we do related to the One NYC sort of longer-term strategic plan is in 2015, there was a commitment to move 800,000 people out of poverty in New York City by 2025, and we are tracking this for the administration. And we're on track to meet the goal. This year, approximately 240,000 people were moved out of poverty. Next slide, please. So another way that the city is really focusing on innovation is building evidence around what works, in particular to produce poverty, so that the city can allocate resources or repurpose resources into strategies that are effective. So one of the things that we did when our office was first created was a pilot around college completion. It's called the CUNY ASAP program, and it basically ends up doubling graduation rates. So this pilot started in 2007 with 1,000 students. At this point in 2019, it has 25,000 students, which represents about half of all incoming freshmen at our local community colleges. And for further context, when this pilot started, the 3-year graduation rate at our City University of New York was 13% for associate degrees. That's like a 2-year degree. And now it's up to 30%. So this has really had a tremendous impact on the way that our City University produces graduates. Next slide, please. And finally, the third way in which we have supported the longer-term vision, as outlined in One NYC, is applying data, technology, and service design to create more effective service delivery. So we created a digital tool called Access NYC. It's a benefit screening tool which allows people to screen for local, state, and federal benefits. It makes it easier for people essentially to get benefits and ultimately helps with poverty reduction. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn to some of the key lessons that we've learned in the past 12 to 13 years doing this work. So as I explained earlier, we really think that innovation and evidence building go hand in hand, and that it's really important to document your outcomes, evaluate the impact of your work. Strong leadership is critical, whether that's the mayor or some other, leadership within your locality. They really need to be prioritizing innovation and evidence building. It's hard to do this work, we feel, without that. A lot can be learned from failure. So we've done, 100 different initiatives, projects, et cetera, since we were created. Maybe about 20% of those were actually effective strategies. So you really need, to take risks, and you need the space to fail. That's not always possible, but I think it's important to this work. Innovation also requires, at least from our vantage, human and financial resources, which I do understand not everybody has. But city government, at least here, it's very focused on core delivery of services. That's what typically the money goes towards. And so you need to add these human and financial resources to create a space to innovate. Collaboration is key. We partner with all sorts of people, from our nonprofit organizations in New York City to independent researchers, philanthropy, and these partnerships are really essential to getting our work done. And then finally, that design should be human-centered. And whatever the project is, that the innovative project is that's being done, there's a need to sort of focus on the end user or client and incorporate their perspective into the thing that you are building or creating, and figure out how the client will be using the service or the product, how the client will be engaging with the service or the product. And then when you're in the implementation phase, you really need to create feedback loops so that you can adapt your service or product as necessary based on the feedback that you're getting from your users. Thank you. I'm going to end here.
Carson Hicks, Executive Director for Economic Opportunity of New York City. Very interesting insights. We definitely speak the same language on the evaluation of outcomes. I think the stat from the survey that only 16 cities report a systematic evaluation of their innovation outcomes is indeed in itself calling for further evidence. Very interesting examples that you've provided related to data and how you take stock of your project success to drive different budget allocations, and how you put digital innovation at the service of more effective service delivery. And I think your point about failure, and will be very interesting to hear more about that in the subsequent discussion, is a very interesting one. Everybody's keen on sharing success stories, but we definitely need to think about different formats where there can be, open discussions about what has not worked and what are some of the pitfalls to avoid. I have to say this is a very good point for the audience. So we'll now move to the third speaker, and I'm very happy to welcome Adria Finch, who's the Director of Innovation of the City of Syracuse in the United States. You've been embedding innovation throughout City Hall, and you introduced a number of programs that are empowering employees to incorporate innovation practices. We look forward to hearing from you. You have 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you for having me. My name is Adria Finch. I'm the Director of Innovation with the City of Syracuse. We are a small city right in the middle of New York State in the United States. And I'm going to talk to you today kind of about the evolution of how we utilize data and incorporate it into our innovation work. So I will have you go to the next slide. Back in the early 2000s, there was a mayor in office here in Syracuse who decided to implement a program called Cyrostat that was modeled off of CityStat in Boston. I was not around for this, but what I have heard is that it wasn't the best program. The staff didn't really like it. They felt that they were always in the hot seat. They had to do all this extra work to compile data about specific projects, and it was not outcome oriented. So once a month, they would get in front of the mayor and show a table kind of like this one in the background. This table is actually about overtime numbers, and they would show up and kind of get yelled at for their performance, but then there would be no drive or no innovation to actually change things. So if you could go to the next slide. In 2015, we had a new mayor. Her name was Mayor Miner, And we received a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies to set up an innovation team. So we started out as a team of 4 people, and we had a variety of skill sets. One person specifically was focused on data. And our mayor at the time, I guess she appreciated data a little bit, but she didn't really see the value of it. And so we set off to kind of prove the value of how to use data and incorporate it into our operations. So the next slide shows, so we initially started working on infrastructure projects. So we identified specific infrastructure systems that needed improvement, and we started to actually look for data to actually start to baseline and figure out the real condition of our infrastructure systems. And what we found was that a lot of the data didn't exist, or to some degree, people didn't know that they had data. So we started out by doing a data audit, honestly, so we could try to figure out what is the real condition of our roads, what is the real condition of our water mains. The departments were very siloed, and they didn't really share their data. To some degree, we put out a call to say, hey, send us any data that you have about infrastructure. And it took, I was in a meeting 5 months later, and somebody was like, oh, we have this spreadsheet that maintains the ratings of all of the roads. And we hadn't seen that yet, even though we had been working with this department and this division for the whole 5 months, and we had asked for the data. They just didn't even understand what data was. And so that became a really great tool for us. But the other thing that we really started to realize with the infrastructure work is that our city honestly just had trouble counting things. And this is problematic for a few different reasons. One, again, we can't really baseline the problem, and it's hard to see improvement. But the other thing was that to some degree, the staff who was doing the labor, they were the boots on the ground, there were people filling the potholes, they didn't have all the information to tell the story about the work that they were doing. So for example, they said, oh, we think we fill probably 2,000 potholes a year, when in actuality, they were filling 7,000 potholes a year. And so just by starting to collect that data, first it allowed us to baseline so we could actually start to implement innovation practices and measure it. But it also helped us to get that staff on our side so we could provide them praise and tell the story of the innovation, which I think is really important. So can you go to the next slide? So we use this data, again, to baseline initiatives, and we developed a portfolio initially of about 12 or 13 different initiatives with specifically the water department, public works, and the engineering department. And we had these meetings, they were about every 6 weeks with the mayor, the respective department heads, the chief of staff, and our office to talk about progress towards different initiatives that we had. And these meetings kind of took on a few different forms. We started out with kind of this stoplight image on the left-hand side of the screen, where we clearly defined this is one specific initiative, all related to citizen reporting. We had specific targets, and then we also identified the next steps. Eventually, this was kind of a manual thing that we had to put together. Eventually, we got to a place where it was automated, so people could log into the dashboard and see it. The problem with this related to our innovation work was that to some degree we were kind of creating our own silo. We in our office would compile the data, we would put it together, we would email it out to the relevant department heads, but they wouldn't really look at it before they got in front of the mayor. And then it just wasn't helpful in really pushing innovation, identifying, are there problems, how do we move past them? And so we kind of continued, I should, with this one, say, in addition to doing those stock take meetings, we really wanted to focus on storytelling. So it's not always kind of that hard quantitative data, but sometimes we like to talk about the qualitative data and the qualitative wins as well, especially as we started to incorporate some more human-centered design principles. Sometimes there are some major wins that come in the form of qualitative data as well. And so we do a couple of different things to tell the story and the success of our work. We have a blog. We actually have, and now we always keep on hand what we call storytelling interns who make videos about different projects that are going on in the city to also kind of help with morale. And then the other thing that we built is we started to maintain what we called an iTeam CV. So it's giant, basically just this giant list of every project we've ever done. And all of this was really important because in 2018, in January 2018, we went through a mayoral transition. So the mayor that we started under, she had termed out, and so we brought a new mayor in. And so we actually morphed into the Office of Accountability, Performance, and Innovation. So this is the door to our office, not that exciting of a picture, but behind it, we basically said that we really wanted to kind of change the way that we operate. And we wanted to ensure that kind of data, accountability, and innovation are all coming together. So could you go to the next slide? So this is kind of a triangle that we use to describe what we do here in Syracuse now. So we have a couple different divisions. I oversee the innovation division. I have a colleague that oversees a data division, and we come together and work together in these performance meetings that are really driving innovation. And so what is shown in this is that everything is kind of really interdependent upon one another. So the data team, oh, can you go back? So the data team will pull data, and then we use that data in actually department head meetings to make progress on specific mayoral objectives. And once a month, we go through a different mayoral objective. And then I meet with the relevant department heads after to say, okay, this is what the data showed. What are you going to do within the next month to actually move change? And then we also have folks that kind of work, I always call them like the closers, who come in and actually are kind of this accountability wing that helps to get the projects done. And it's all very interconnected. So next slide now. So these were the mayoral objectives that I was speaking about. All of the innovation projects that we are focused on are driving towards one of these 4 objectives that the mayor has. And we ensure that both we have data to measure these, but also we are working with departments to actually move forward and make change and actually develop new programs to address these objectives. So the next slide. We use this philosophy called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results, to actually use the data to measure change and drive innovation. And so this whole philosophy, it actually came initially from Intel. A lot of companies in Silicon Valley use it. But you define these objectives, which is basically the what you want to accomplish, and then these key results, which is the how you want to accomplish them. And those key results are typically SMART goals, and then we have specific metrics that feed into them. And so again, this allows us to really iterate upon things using data and develop innovations that drive back to those main mayoral objectives. Next slide. And then the last thing that I mentioned, that I had already said, was that we actually do these OKR meetings in department head meetings. We had one right before this today where we went over the fiscal sustainability objective. And that's really beneficial for a couple of things. First of all, it provides collaboration, which we never had before. So when we would do stock take meetings historically, it would be those specific department heads. Now everybody's kind of around the table and we can hear different stories. So just one example of a win is we were talking about sewer backups. And how do we start to reduce sewer backups? And the Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development actually spoke up. She's like, do you know that there's this grant program that exists that homeowners can get money to actually fix the sewer backups if they have them? And if we would have been kind of in our historic little bubble or silo, trying to work through this with just engineering and public works and maybe somebody from the mayor's office, we never would have made that connection. So by just having different minds and voices in the room, it really helps to spark some ideas. And you know, some of them are bigger, some of them like aren't as big. It's like this grant program that already exists. You should just be aware of it. But it's really helpful. And then the final thing that kind of comes to it is that by being exposed and working with all these different department heads, they've really come to value our services. And now we have all these trainings and events where they participate and they ask us for help. And it's just identifying more and more opportunities for us to go into departments and work on the ground level to get work done and to innovate more.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these insights. I think it shows, going back to the discussion earlier on capacity, how much of a difference it can make when you have a dedicated team in place that can actually afford to raise the interest and show the utility function of data and the interdependability, as you showed it very well, between data and innovation. I think it's a very interesting story for other colleagues. I'm sure this will raise a lot of interest. We'll now transition to our next speaker. So I give the floor to Stéphane Guidouin, who's the director of the Montreal Urban Innovation Lab. You're going to take us through some of the major projects that you've been in charge of. So I'll give you the floor, Stéphane, for 10 minutes.
Hello. So thank you very much, and I wanted to thank the OECD for that work that you've done, which is very interesting and that goes hand in hand with what we are doing currently. So just a bit of a background about Montreal on the next slide. So Montreal is basically an island, but there are different layers. There is Montreal City, which is more the orange-reddish part of the island, which is made of 19 boroughs. And one of the things to understand from Montreal is that it's fairly decentralized in the sense that street management, for example, leisure, culture, things like that are managed at the borough level. What we call the city central manage economic development and other things like that. So the city on itself is about 1.8 million inhabitants. And the island has another 12 cities that we don't control directly, but there is a kind of overarching body, which is 2 million inhabitants, and the metro area is about 4 million people in its 82 cities. So it's a very layered governance, and so the Urban Innovation Office is part of the City Central. So we have to see how we approach innovation in that situation where we don't control everything. So from the beginning, even internally, all the question of collaboration and cooperation is very important, and as I will say it frankly, not always easy to get. Just a bit of history to understand where we come from. So initially, my team was the Smart City Office. It was created in 2014. And the focus was really about delivering new services to citizens using technology. So we had an action plan 2015-2017, which brought something, so included something like 70 action, but we delivered something like 40 of them. But the evaluation that we did at the end of the action plan was that what we were doing realistically was innovation. So the team was initially created about creating projects, but we ended up doing our name, and we didn't have the legitimacy to do that. So we had a mayoral change in 2017 at the end, and a few months after it was decided to transition what was the Smart City Office to something more clearly dedicated to innovation, which is the current Urban Innovation Lab, with three main pillars, which was city engagement, data for decision making, and innovation processes. Innovation processes, now you can go back a bit. So innovation processes was quite obvious because there was nothing that was documented internally. So many teams were doing kind of innovation, but nothing was documented. The other one were a little.
I think, Stéphane, we have lost the sound. Stéphane, maybe we are not hearing you anymore. We move to Stéphanie for some of the takeaway messages from what you've heard so far, and we're liaising via the chat with Stéphane so we can reconnect him after you. It's not initially the sequencing we had in mind, but I think all in all you have enough material, Stéphanie, maybe to provide some discussions ahead of the Q&A. So Stéphanie, you have the floor.
Partnered with the OECD on this first of its kind effort to start understanding the scope and landscape of city innovation around the world. We're really excited about this work, and thank you all for being here today to learn more about it. And as Aziza said, there is more to come. You know, I think in listening to the conversation, the first slide that the OECD presented, or one of the first slides, was kind of focusing on the different cadences and the different components of what we need to make innovation work in cities. And I think, you know, this notion of having the organizational structure, right, an innovation component, an innovation team, people who are dedicated to making sure this new way of problem solving is embedded in the city's capacity. Having a data piece that is about understanding the baseline of what cities are facing, what exactly is going on in these challenging problems, and what does it look like on a numbers perspective, and integrating that throughout the partnerships that cities need to develop, that it's no longer the mentality of we need to solve these problems as a city government and just roll them out to the public. I think this notion of working on problems in partnership and collaboratively with external stakeholders that are nonprofits and private sector, as well as residents, is really critical. And so, you know, that is something that we have heard throughout all the rest of these presentations, right? In Stockholm, in New York, in Syracuse, and Stefan was certainly getting at that, and it was on his slide before we lost audio with him. And I think those really are the key components. It's so great to see that these cities who are successful in moving this forward have worked really hard in developing these things, these components. And I think that it's not that any one component alone will get you there. It's that these components really do need to all be present and integrated, that you can't just have data exist by itself if you don't integrate the human-centered approach to understanding problems as well. Having the quantitative what of the data and the qualitative why of human-centered design combined with the creativity, and I think Gunnar was talking about this, the mindset, right? Making sure that the mindset of innovation is embedded into the culture as well, beyond the innovation team. So I really heard these messages over and over again, and that the metrics piece, right? We can't just use data to understand the baseline of a problem. We really do need to challenge ourselves as innovators to measure our impact. And I think as this wave of innovation started coming into government, a lot of people were very reluctant to do that. It was like, hey, we're making things better. We're using design. Trust us. People's lives are better. But that really isn't enough. We really do need to hold ourselves accountable to measuring the impact of the work that we're doing. And I heard that coming loud and clear from the cities that just spoke. And it's certainly something at Bloomberg Philanthropies that we make sure all of our cities are able to do. And it's not important for the sake of doing it. It's important because we need to know if we're having the impact we really intended. And if we're not, then we need to understand why. And if we are, then what do we need to do to amplify that success? And how can we spread that lesson to another city to make sure that the cities that are doing innovation are not doing this in silos, that we're sharing this because we can, right? We're not in the private sector. We don't have intellectual property rights, although Gunnar was talking about it, which is really interesting internally in the city. But collectively, when we think about the ability for us to support one another as cities, it's a really unique opportunity that private sector doesn't really get to do, and we need to really amplify that. So amazing things that I think we've heard so far, and hopefully we'll hear more from Stefan. I know they are doing really great work in Montreal, and if we don't get to hear from him today, I'm sure he would be open to anyone following up with him who's on this call and didn't get a chance to hear the rest of his presentation. Really quickly about Bloomberg Philanthropies, because you know, we are in partnership with the OECD on this effort. For those of you who are not aware, you know, we have multiple. Michael Bloomberg is the man behind Bloomberg Philanthropies. He's a 3-term mayor of New York. He is a self-made billionaire who uses his money and his wealth to make the world a better place. And the mission at Bloomberg Philanthropies is to ensure better, longer lives for the greatest number of people around the world. We have multiple ways that we do that at the Philanthropies, through arts, education, climate change, environment, health, But we also have the government innovation team, which is the team that I'm a part of and that we're in partnership with the OECD with. And our role here at Government Innovation Team is to really bring the best practices and the best support we can to cities to use innovation to solve really big problems. And so we have multiple programs in our multiple teams and efforts in this larger program that we have. Adria, who is the director of the Syracuse I-Team, she's in our program. I lead the innovation team program, so that's one example of the work we do. We also have a program where we're doing more light touch coaching and capacity building in cities through a partnership that we have with Harvard University and a city leadership initiative there. We also have a program called What Works Cities, which focuses on making sure that cities are able to build a data infrastructure, kind of like Adria was talking. And a lot of our I-teams have had to do this when they're starting to innovate. They are trying to understand, well, what's the baseline of the problem from a data perspective quantitatively, and finding that the infrastructure isn't there and they're not counting things. They don't know. So our I-teams sometimes have to do that. We also have a larger program called the What Works Cities, which is helping to build that infrastructure in cities in the United States. We also have a Mayor's Challenge program where it's a challenge and prize competition where we ask cities to come up with really bold, innovative solutions to their challenging problems. We've done this in Europe, in the US, and Latin America, which is really exciting. And I think, happy to answer questions about that, but, more importantly, we are at 10 minutes after 11, so I want to make sure I'm not taking up too much time. I think, again, to reiterate what we've heard and what we're seeing, beyond the survey as well in the landscape of city innovation, the things that you really need to make innovation work are the people, having a dedicated approach, that technology doesn't actually equal innovation, which I think was something we talked about, someone was talking about earlier in this call. Funding, which can be a challenge sometimes. We at Bloomberg Philanthropies developed the innovation team program years ago because we knew there wasn't a proof of concept yet to encourage cities to actually spend that amount of money on innovation when they have firefighters to provide for and teachers. And so we provided that seed money to say, great, we know innovation matters in cities. We're going to prove it to you. And that has absolutely been successful. And then that mindset throughout the culture and leadership of embedding that into the city so that it spreads beyond the innovation team, which is easier said than done. But it means that, you can't have one person to do all of this work. And I see some cities making that mistake early on of saying, okay, we have a chief innovation officer. We're going to do innovation. But it takes so much more than that. And I think these cities are great that have spoken on this presentation today. Have done a great job of representing that, working in silos, collaboration, and storytelling, which Adria was touching on at the end of her presentation. That it's great to do this work, but if you aren't communicating the benefits of that in a way that actually connects emotionally with the problems themselves and the people that you're helping, you'll never get this beyond the team. And so I think that is one of the pieces that helps unlock the ability to spread innovation. So if you're a city that's new to this, or a city that's been doing this a long time and you're on the call, storytelling is key no matter where you are.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. You and your team have been our partners in crime for this big piece of work, and I have to say we've learned a lot, and very happy to consider also the next steps. I'm being told that Stefan is back, so we'll give him the floor back for the last few minutes of his presentations, and then I'll open the chat. Meanwhile, feel free to send your questions via the chat so we have a pipeline and we can address them in a consistent way, either to the Secretariat of OECD or Bloomberg on the survey itself, or to each of the other speakers from cities that are participating in the webinar. And of course, also the opportunity for you to flag initiatives ongoing in your cities that we can showcase to your peers. So now back to Stéphane for the final part of his presentation. Please.
Thank you, and sorry for the connection issues. So I hope you hear me well now. So yeah, just to continue, the question of citizen engagement and data was perceived in the snapshot as two of the weak points of Montreal. And that's what we decided to work on before having that snapshot, but it's interesting to have a confirmation from the snapshot. And there is an interesting dynamic between citizen engagement and data, because more and more we try to take decisions based on data, but at the same time we see citizens that maybe not understand all the time how the decisions were made and how data were used. So it's really important for us to find a balance between what citizens perceive and what the data tells us. So next slide. Those aspects are something that we put in place in the Smart City Challenge, and as you can see, the three first lines, the dates, is just to show that what I will explain about the Smart City Challenge is basically took place at the same time as we were transitioning from Smart City Office to a more innovation project. So the Smart City Challenge was a call for project from the federal government for different cities, different categories. So Montreal aimed for the largest category, which was 50 million over 5 years. And the project were mainly about smart and local mobility, access to food and for vulnerable people. And we developed to support those two teams, data trust, so one in mobility and one in what we call social data, which is one of the lacking data that was also pointed by the snapshot, and also a work around experimentation for governance and regulatory. If we can go to the last slide. One of the things that came clear for us as we were doing the Smart City Challenge and other projects that we are doing, it's to work with local communities. So doing call for project and trying to combine city-led project and external project, and that's what we did for the Smart City Challenge. In the end, most of the project will be executed by partner, but each of the project that I presented is basically a blend between existing initiatives that we wanted to do within the cities and projects that were brought to us by partners, and we did almost 1 year work to blend those projects together to find the commonalities and to find what were the outcomes that we were all trying to do. So in the end, and I think it's a bit of a signature for our project, and maybe what led us to win is to have what we call a hybrid project, which is really strong interrelated project with partners that could be universities, it could be other institutions like transit, public transport, and also lots of community projects that we are supporting. The other thing that we are seeing is to have short cycle feedback loops, which is something that was already brought in order to see the impact as soon as it's possible in the process and adjust. And the last thing is the best metrics are not always the most obvious one, and usually we will need to change metrics as we move forward, and that's something that's very difficult to understand and to accept. But usually what we think are the best metrics when we start the project are not those that we will see the most relevant as we move forward. And we've seen previous, on other projects that we've done, a metric that we thought was the best one, and at the end of the project we saw no improvement in the metrics that we were looking at. But as we were trying to go a little further, we saw that another metric that we didn't have on our radar had a strong improvement, and it was a relevant metric in the end. And the very last point that I have, and it's interesting to have the OECD moving on that domain, is to have cities working together. We are working currently with different cities on things like Cities for Digital Rights. We have partnership with Los Angeles on mobility data and so on. And more, I think it's very important for us to group together, but first to share our good and less good ideas, but also to be together to go against some of the mega trends that are going on, and some of the market forces that are going not in the direction that we want to have. So it's very interesting to have cities working together and having organizations like the OECD and obviously the Bloomberg Foundation that is supporting this work of building up together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stéphane Guillouin. You're the director of the Urban Innovation Lab of the City of Montreal in Canada. I'm happy we could have you back. Very interesting insights, and in particular, the learning by doing in the innovation process and metrics themselves, and the fact that we need to accept, imperfection and changes as we test and pilot test. That's very much a message we're sending, and the value of the peer learning. That's something that has really come out strongly from the full process. So we are not doing so bad with time. We initially had about 20 minutes for discussion. It's now about 12:13. Maybe we can run a bit after if need be. I have 3 questions raised so far. So what I would suggest is that maybe we have a first go at this. And meanwhile, if you have questions, I invite you to convey them via the chat. We have colleagues here aggregating them, and maybe we have a second round. So I'll read out the questions we have received. Did you only survey chief innovation officers or also directors of innovation in cities? So I think it's very much about the target audience and who has provided responses to the survey that was introduced at the beginning of the webinar. A second question that is, what did the cities report they were getting out of innovation capacity? It's true, we said that some were assessing the outcomes. So what are those kinds of outcomes that have come out of the survey findings? And then one maybe easier to address, whether there is still an opportunity for more cities to participate. So maybe I will invite Senna to take these, and meanwhile, please raise your questions via the chat. In 2-3 minutes, we'll take a second round. Please.
So I'll start with the easiest first, of course. If there's still an opportunity for cities to participate in the survey, and there is, this will be ongoing. We're developing the work further to understand eventually how innovation capacity is leading to better well-being outcomes in cities. So, of course, the more cities we have participate, the closer we can get. And we'll be deploying and releasing this survey to an extended group of cities to participate. So let us know if you'd like to continue with us in this journey. Yes. And then the next was, I'll take it in order, who we were able to survey during this, during the first round. And it's true, due to our partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies and Stephanie's team, we were able to identify chief innovation officers and director of innovation within the cities that we asked, but we did extend it to cities that the OECD has also been working with that didn't necessarily have this capacity or this role within the city, but that had reported that innovation is taking place and scattered throughout the divisions and comes in many forms. And we really thought it was important to capture this capacity as well. So we had a range of respondents, teams led by CIOs and DIOs, but then also capacity in different forms within the city. And the third is what cities mostly responded as getting out of their innovation capacity. And there were 3 that really lit up when we accumulated all the responses. And a strong one was on the service delivery, cities delivering transport, social services differently and better to their residents by using this, by using innovation. Another was around the internal organization within the municipality, that they were working differently, problem solving, bringing different stakeholders to the table within the municipality that were able to help them solve problems. So we have Adria's example in Syracuse with the sewer backups. And then the final was around resident outcomes, their improved health outcomes, and job outcomes. And we reflect on this with the city of New York and their focus on reducing poverty and increasing equity, and how this is very much an economic-driven force. So that ties into some of the questions and responses that we got from cities.
Great. Thank you very much, Sena. Indeed, if you have some peer cities that you're working with and you think they would be a good addition to the pool when the survey is extended again after this summer, please let us know, and we're happy to plug them into the next phase. And you will see in the report an annex with actually the lead departments in the cities that have responded to the survey, or at least that have coordinated in many instances. This has required inputs from different divisions, so it's very hard to know exactly in which city, who is behind the responses that were provided, but there's a lead institution, and that can be identified also for possible follow-up if some of the findings are interesting for you to replicate, so that you can be directly in connection or in contact with each other. I have a question from the city of Orlando, Anna Higgins, who is targeted to Adria. So I will give the floor to Adria. The question is this: what media do you use for storytelling in addition to the video that you mentioned, and which stories are effective? So if we can unmute Adria so she can take that question.
Sure. So we do blog posts. We also build really good relationships. At least I think they're really good relationships with our local media, so TV stations, radio stations, and the local newspaper. We also actually here we have a couple of student newspapers that are still really highly read. So we actually have really good relationships with and do storytelling with kind of the university newspapers as well. And then we also do different work on social media. We don't have our own kind of department social media accounts and pages, so we typically leverage the mayor's office's accounts, and we do everything from we announced like our priority area on like a Facebook Live event that we were a year ago, we were focusing on housing stability. So we try to use a bunch of different channels. And so some stories are obviously more fun to tell than others. My storytelling interns right now are tasked with kind of making permitting interesting and sexy. They have some ideas, but you know, permitting isn't people care about it, but it isn't always a great story. So we try to think creatively around a variety of different topics. Some of them are easier to get the public excited about. But we don't really limit ourselves, because honestly, the storytelling has two different components. I think the first of it is actually sharing our work and ensuring that we have support in the community and that our office can continue to exist. But the other kind of really key component with storytelling is telling the stories of the people that are actually implementing our initiatives. So we try not to be too heavily featured in our storytelling work, because this is a way to actually showcase somebody who normally probably isn't getting praise. You know, somebody who's doing permitting reviews oftentimes is only highlighted when a permit review takes a really long time and they're getting in trouble. So this is an opportunity to not only showcase the work that we're doing, but also the great efforts that are happening with other folks throughout the organization.
Aziza, we can't hear you.
None of you? Everybody seems to hear. So Gunnar, you hear me? Yes? And Stefan, you hear me too? Okay, so Stephanie, now you do? Okay, very good. I was just saying we take the last question on what cities report they're doing to enhance the management capability. And maybe, Sena, you can address that. And if any of the city representative wants to give an example of how you are addressing management capabilities within your own city administration, please send us a chat and we'll give you the floor. So, Sena, if you take that one, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes. So what came loud and clear from the survey is the ability to partner and collaborate and cooperate within the administration and also externally that helped really advance the innovation capacity within cities. And the data component as well, partnering with academics, think tanks to be able to translate and build the capacity to learn the lessons and implement them within the city that don't necessarily exist within the city, but having the backup from the external environment was helpful in managing this. And then what Gunnar said, like leadership, all kinds of leadership from the political to the internal was also helpful in having the buy-in to be able to deploy and be successful within the cities.
Good. Is there anyone from the speakers that wants to complement this response to what you're doing within your city administration? So, Adria, okay, you have the floor.
Can everybody hear me? It's beeping. Okay, so we're actually just starting to dabble our toes in this. I just finished an agenda for an all-day workshop with department heads where we're going to be talking about how to incorporate innovation and manage employees to really promote change. And this is going to be structured in a way where I talked about the mayoral objectives that we have. We're trying to make them actually cascade down through different levels of staff. And actually, so we're empowering and teaching department heads how to empower their staff to make innovation. So in order to get the work done, Stephanie mentioned this earlier, we can't do everything. We need help. And so we're trying to now teach department heads to manage their staff in a way so that they can actually be innovative and implement things on their own. So I will have more information about how that goes at the end of the month, but I think it's a really cool format. So if anybody wants any information about what we're going to be doing, feel free to email me and I can share our agenda and the outline for the day.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Adria. And actually, we'll be in follow-up to this webinar sharing the list of participants with the emails. You see there are a number of participants that joined us from a very diverse set of cities, from Bratislava to Rotterdam, Chelsea, Otsu, Rochester, Medellin, Memphis, Orlando, Seattle, and many others. So you'll have each other's contact if you're not already in touch, and you can definitely follow up. So thank you all very much for your participation in this webinar. Big thanks to the team here at the OECD and to Stephanie and her team as well at Bloomberg Philanthropies for the organization. I think we had a very fruitful discussion. I hope this was a good teaser for you to look at the report when you receive it over the coming week or two, with, as I said, a good window for you to read it quietly, to comment, to fact check, but also to make us suggestions for the guidance to be more robust and more fit for your objectives. We will engage afterwards in a second phase so that you know the idea is to launch the report in September officially. So we have a good few weeks to fine-tune and finalize the substance and the messages out there. And then we will engage in a second follow-up activity where this time it will be much more focused on the outcomes of innovation. The idea is to correlate the innovation capacity of cities with the well-being outcomes in those cities. We are already measuring well-being in many cities at the OECD. We have now started to measure innovation. So the next phase will be very much about putting the two in perspective and seeing to what extent all these efforts in innovation capacity are contributing or not in the end to better resident outcomes. I think this will be a very strong addition and contribution to upscaling innovation strategies worldwide. So I thank you all very much. We'll follow up by email with, as I said, the list of participants, the link to access the full webinar. Feel free to share that with your constituencies. You will receive shortly the report. We do count on your feedback, criticisms, objections to help us make it better. And we look forward to our joint communication strategy for the launch and to the follow-up activities to think of in the coming months. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll be in touch.